Hey friends, welcome to the Raising Boys and Girls podcast. I'm Sissy Goff.
And I'm David Thomas.
And I'm Melissa Trevathan.
And we're so glad you joined us for this conversation. Let's dive in.
Rosalind Wiseman has never felt like she had a job. Instead, she has been on a quest to help people put words to experiences they struggle to articulate and bring dignity back into our families, schools, work, and communities. As a global thought leader, she speaks on leadership, conflict, communication, and youth culture at the highest levels of government, corporations, and educational institutions. While she tackles serious subjects, her warmth and wit remind us to approach even the most challenging topics with humility, grace, purpose, and sometimes even irreverence. Rosalind is the best-selling author of 9 books, including the New York Times bestsellers Queen Bees and Wannabes, the inspiration for the Mean Girls movie and musical franchise, and Masterminds and Wingmen, named Best Parenting Book by Books for a Better Life. She has been interviewed, profiled in, or written for the New York Times, the London Times, the Atlantic, the Chicago Tribune, the Washington Post, USA Today, NPR affiliates throughout the country, and many others. She is a native of Washington, D.C., a daughter, sister, wife, mother of 2 young men, and lives in Boulder, Colorado. You need a pen and paper for this episode to take notes and walk away with some great conversations to have with your kids and teenagers. And y'all make sure and listen all the way through because she has some especially helpful information at the very end.
Rosalind, we are so excited about having this conversation with you. We have long respected your work. We have long recommended your work to countless parents we spend time with. And absolutely.
And we've been talking about having you on the podcast for probably a decade, wanting to ask you to be on here. So we're so excited.
Thank you for saying yes.
That's a long time. Okay. Well, I'm honored to be here and overdue. Overdue.
Overdue indeed. Will you start out just tell us a little about yourself and how you found your way to the work you're doing.
Yeah. I honestly think I have one of the stranger career trajectories of most people. So I began when I was 21, 22 years old, teaching self-defense to girls. And it was because I had experienced I'd grown up in a pretty healthy, mentally healthy family, no violence in my family at all. But I'd gotten into an abusive relationship in high school, and I was a competitive athlete. Also, I was a tennis player, and I'd gone to a really good school. And I just had a relationship in high school that was really problematic and really troubling, and with a young man that was really struggling in his own way. And so when I went to college, I stopped being a tennis player, and then I got involved in martial arts. And from there, one of the first epiphanies I had is that the experience of being in an abusive relationship is a mind and body experience. It's really integrated. Of course, mind and body are integrated anyway. And so it really was very therapeutic for me. And then I came back to Washington, D.C., where I grew up, and I started a nonprofit that taught self-defense to girls. And I did it with my boyfriend at the time, who is my husband and has been my husband forever. And but we started teaching self-defense to girls. And then from there, because it was so important to process the experience, when I was like 22 years old, some of these young women were 18, they're 4 years younger than me, that I was really listening to them about their rights, their responsibilities to each other, what they were learning from each other. And it just unfolded for me over a period of time in those first couple of years about what girls were vulnerable to and why, and how girls could support each other or not. And then I transitioned from martial arts and self-defense, which I do still think is very important, but I wanted to go to a deeper understanding of the social dynamics that were happening that led girls to being vulnerable to not making, sort of putting relationships above their own, above taking care of themselves. And so that really started me on this journey of me being able to sit in front of you today and be interviewed, today, all these years later.
Wow. I love that that's where you started. And as a counselor to girls, I recommend that every girl before they graduate high school, really by the time they get to high school, I would hope would take a self-defense course. So love that y'all are doing that.
It is amazing. I mean, it seems, there's all these things that happen when people, I think, that even if you never have an experience of violence after taking a class, that the experience of being able to take care of yourself and to be able to tap into your boundaries and be able to talk about them and be able to express them. And I think people sometimes get really fixated on, is it effective? Is it not effective? And I think that's actually that's sometimes a way to put down what people are doing in when they try and pursue something like self-defense, like, well, if you can't do this or if you can't do that, it's not worth doing. I truly believe that the biggest benefit of it is being able to have an experience of what are your physical and emotional boundaries and why is it so hard sometimes to communicate them. And if you have nothing else but that you learn in that experience, it is a profoundly important experience to go through.
Yes, I agree so much. Thank you for sharing that. Well, okay, let's keep talking about girls for a minute.
Okay.
Because I love your book, as does the rest of the world, Queen Bees and Wannabes. And a lot has changed probably since you wrote it. And then there's some things that haven't changed, but would love to hear you talk about what you feel like has changed. Now, you know, you've updated it several times.
I have.
Since then. There's been a little movie based on it as well.
Just a little
called Mean Girls.
A little tiny one that nobody knows about. Nobody quotes. No memes. There are no memes. Nothing. So yeah, I mean, I think what's important about Queen Bees and Wannabes is I first wrote it when I was like 20 some years ago. And I think what's important actually is to start with what's the same. Because there are evergreen issues, and it's really quite common now for people who are parents themselves today to come up to me and say, my mom gave that book to me when I was 15, right? Because you can imagine what that's like. Right?
Yes.
I mean,
we get it.
We're thrilled, right? But then you're like, oh my God. Because that moment of, wait, I'm grown? Like, when did that happen? Right. So but what's evergreen is how important relationships are, that being in a group and feeling a sense of belonging is absolutely essential to adolescent development. And it is actually the primary lesson that we need to learn as we go from children to adolescence is being in a group, and also how do you operate in a group? How do you navigate conflict in a group? How do you advocate for yourself in a group? How do you learn the social rules that are sometimes unspoken that you've got to sort of figure out? Those are evergreen, and they're actually really, of course, and you all know this, tied to the job of being an adolescent. And it's not a bad thing, right? Peer pressure, I think we say oh, it's peer pressure. We need to learn how to operate in a group, and that's a complicated thing. And so within that, what's evergreen is people telling secrets, betraying you, having a friend who says something and you don't like and you don't know what to say because you don't want to make it awkward and you don't want to maybe threaten the relationship because you say something that you feel. So you sit on something, having a crush, getting rejected. All of these things are evergreen. So from grandmothers today to girls growing up today, everybody can relate to that. And what's different, of course, is that girls have no privacy. So I grew up with privacy. Girls today do not grow up with privacy. I also think that what's different is that parents are much more anxious. And they react much faster, right? They get much more involved and they catastrophize much faster than parents did a generation ago. And that really started we can see the seeds of that starting in the 80s. But, I really do believe that actually one of the biggest things, that the obvious low-hanging fruit, right, that, people think I'm going to say is social media, because of course that's true, right? But it's social media, and they think I'm going to talk about like what's so different, social media and young people. That's absolutely true, and we can talk about that. But what's also true is parents on Facebook, parenting groups, talking to each other about what they think is facts, and then actually turning that into gossip, and then being able to whip everybody up into tremendous amounts of anxiety.
Yes.
Then it pulls apart the fabric of our communities. And that is not something that my mother grew up with, have as a parent. My parents didn't grow up with that. But it's really, honestly, I think we would truly, and parents could get mad at me about this, but I'm going to stand on it, is that I think we'd all be better off if there were no Facebook parenting groups.
Yes.
Because of that reason, because there are people who put things on there that believe that are facts, and then other people assume that they are facts, and then it becomes the fact of the community, when the people who maybe know the truth are too scared to actually say anything about it, and they just have to sit there in silence. And it literally tears apart the fabric of our communities.
Well, building on that, we did want to ask, how do you believe technology has impacted the world of girls? Talk more about that.
Sure. So, it really is this back and forth, because I know that people really, the easy answer is technology is unhealthy for young people, right? And that they shouldn't get their phones until they are 16. I understand this conversation that's going on in the culture, and I think it's a very oversimplified way of looking at it. And I understand why parents want a simple reason for something, right? Because because parenting is overwhelming sometimes. And being a parent really means that you're going to have moments where you don't know the answer to something. And there is no guarantee of a solution that makes you feel better about this child that you just love to death and you're so worried about. And so I really do understand the feeling of wanting an easy answer. I get that. And if parenting is not simple. And so my answer to you about that with technology is that when we, for example, absolutely Instagram for girls, I believe, is not very healthy. But who told me that from the first is girls. Many, many years ago, girls said to me, this is making me feel worse about myself. And so I absolutely can see why Instagram would be so difficult for girls. And I would 100% say yes, being the later you can bring Instagram into a girl's life, the better. Absolutely. The other part, being able to track where girls are, right? Lots of parents want to be able to track girls' locations. Well, girls who are really invested in having their parents not know where they are can always figure out how to get around those location apps. They always can. And so I want us to really think about our easy answer to calm ourselves down versus what's really helpful to girls. And then the other part about social media is that, because I talk a lot to girls about yonder pouches and things like that, because all these schools this year just were like, no phones. And I think it's great. A lot of kids are saying that it's really good to have more strict rules about phones during the day, because that's really, really good. And I absolutely would agree with that. And here's the thing, and here, let me just get super granular, is what we need to talk to girls about. And it goes right back to their lives about friendships, is that because social media has created a situation for girls where they feel that they constantly have to answer each other, right, on many different kinds of platforms. And they have to focus their comment or their or their whatever in a very sophisticated way, because they're signaling friendship and relationships and social status to each other constantly on different kinds of apps. And so they are constantly the world of them trying to measure what they should say. And boys, by the way, do this too. That stuff of them focusing on that, and then turning themselves inside out to be able to please other people, that I would call the invisible audience, that is the thing, the preoccupation with that. That's what we needed to be talking to young people about. So yes, we can give them very strong regulations, limitations, boundaries on phone usage. But to think that that is going to be that is the cause of the problem of their mental health, and therefore taking away is the solution to their mental health, is just us wanting to have an easy answer.
David, I can't count how many parents come up to us at events that are pregnant with their third or fourth child. They are heroic for wanting to learn and grow. I wish we could give them free babysitting, a spa day, and a nap. But what we can do is tell them about our sponsor, Needed. It will help them feel more energy, mental clarity, and resilient through products we've come to know and love from our friends at Needed.
I love that Needed was expertly formulated by women for women.
I love that Needed understands the mental load on women is heavy, from stress to caregiving, multitasking, technology use, and the unique demands of everyday life. They're backed by over 4,000 nutrition and health experts, including OBGYNs, midwives, and dietitians. And the brand really understands the unique needs of parents.
92% of women taking cognitive support saw an improvement in overall cognitive function within 4 weeks. Needed's cognitive support is designed to help improve key aspects of cognitive health to help you feel like you again.
My favorite product right now are Needed's cognitive and stress support. I've noticed better focus and attention, mental clarity, concentration, better ability to cope with stress, and more energy for chasing my nephews and a puppy around. We want those benefits for you too.
And they even have products specifically designed for dads too. I love their men's multi that supports everything from libido and sperm health to brain function and hair coverage.
If you're looking for products that can optimally support your brain health, mood, energy, mental clarity, and replenish your nutrient stores after having one or more kids, check out Needed's comprehensive line of nutritional products. Head over to thisisneeded.com and use code RBG for 20% off your first order.
That's THISISNEEDED.com and use code RBG for 20% off your first order.
Well, one of our favorite things about the book was the sections that you had on Check Your Baggage. I remember reading that the first time and being so excited. And I think you have been a real inspiration to us in our writing because of that, of wanting parents. I mean, we've been talking about a lot with anxiety. The best thing you can do for your kids is do your own work. And so talking about parents being more anxious, talking about the parenting Facebook groups. I mean, that was one of our questions for you is how does it feel like the world of parents has changed?
Yeah. So, the other part besides what I was talking about with the Facebook group, is a couple of things. I mean, I think that technology has made the parenting world way worse because so you've got the parenting group that's making you think that your school is like the worst, or your principal is the worst, or something happened and the school did nothing, or just this terrible stuff. And meanwhile, most of the principals, administrators, teachers, counselors, coaches I know are like up in the beginning of the morning trying to figure out how to deal with all the emails and all the things and respond to them fast enough and not make any mistakes. And if they do, then people pile on them even more. And we assume the worst of these people who are trying so hard to just keep up with managing parental anxiety. And I say this knowing, as a mom myself, it's not like I haven't had really difficult experiences with principals, coaches, and teachers as a mom and professional. An educational professional. I've certainly had to work with incompetent principals, coaches, teachers. So let's be clear about that. But to assume that they are, or go really quickly to that assumption, is something that we've got to check. And so unless you have personal experience with the incompetence or lack of integrity of these people, I would like for you to give them a little bit of a break and assume that they are trying their best. But the thing for parents that is, I think, really changed is that in the last, I would say 5 years especially, but it's been growing, is this feeling that you know your child the best. Therefore, you have to know everything about your child. And also you are the person who has to fix and advocate for your child at all times. And one of the things that I think really happened in COVID that was exacerbated in COVID is not about children's readiness of learning. I don't think that's what it was. I think that in COVID, we spent even more time with our primary relationships kids spent more time with their parents, but who they lost were the secondary relationships, the neighbor, the person at their church, the person in their religious organization, the person who was the quote unquote weaker ties, because those weaker, softer ties are actually absolutely critical to a family's well-being and to a child's well-being and to a parent's well-being, because they have to know that there are people, for parents to know that there are people who love their child, like their child, have strong relationships with their child, that their child can go talk to that neighbor about whatever it is, that doesn't have to be all on the parent's shoulders. And I think this thing of parents know best about their kids. Well, you know what? I'm going to also say something as a mom. Sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I actually didn't. And sometimes my love for my children made me not the best person to talk to with them, because sometimes, as my older child would say in particular, my presence, I would walk into a room and my presence was infuriating. That was the word he used, infuriating, because I was so focused on and worried about him that it was intolerable for him to be around me. And so isn't it so much better to be around the people that can watch out for your kid, love your kid, but they're not the parent? That just makes it so that so it's not all on our shoulders, and we can calm down knowing that we don't have to go through this alone. And I think that's one of the things that sort of the politicization of parenting, that we have to do this all our own. We can't do it all our own, and nor should we. And we can be that for other people's children too. I'm a big believer, and we can talk about this. I know this is sort of old school, I guess, is I get to have opinions about other people, about other children. If they're misbehaving, I get to say to them, hey, that thing you just said, absolutely inappropriate.
It's great.
Yes, it is.
So great. Okay, one other question we'd love to ask. You shared some really great ideas for parents of girls to know in terms of social media. Is there anything else you'd say you want parents to know as they watch their girls navigate that animal of social media?
I think, I clearly role modeling. So it's easy for me to say right here, well, you need to role model healthy social media habits, right? It's easy to say. But here's what I actually would like parents to do. I would like parents to sit down with their children or their child across the kitchen table and say to their kid, I'm going to give you 1 minute, and I'm just going to listen. 1 minute where you tell me how you think I use social media and how you see me use my phone. And you cannot argue, and you cannot justify. You cannot give the very good reason why you have to grab your phone during dinner or why you can't sleep at night. So you grab your phone and scroll at night in your bed, that blue haze on you. You got to listen for a minute and just listen. And then what I want you to do is I want you to sit there, because it's going to be really hard, because they're children, they're your children. So they're going to jump on this, right? They're going to be like, ooh, right? Yay. And then say, okay, so it's really important to me that I do what I say. And it's not right for me to be holding you to different standards than me. So I need to work on this. And you thank them, right? And then don't talk to them about their own behavior, right? Don't be doing that. Just be focus on yourself and say, I'm going to focus on myself, because I need to take seriously that what I do is what I say. And that when your children hear things like that, what they're literally processing is my parent is serious, takes seriously role modeling what they want, and that I'm going to take that seriously. So you don't need to lecture them, and you don't need to tell them that they're addicted to their phones, because please don't tell them that they're addicted to their phones. So really don't tell them that. It's that we need to focus on ourselves. And by doing that, they will take us a lot more seriously.
Yes. That's fantastic.
Such a great suggestion. Yes. Okay, so let's shift to the boys because you also have a book called Masterminds and Wingmen, which we love as well. And what would you say are some of the differences you found in your book?
With boys?
Yes.
It's funny. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say to me, "Oh, you wrote Queen Bees and Wannabes, but you have boys. Like, isn't that odd?" And I've always worked with boys and girls equally. But Queen Bees and Wannabes just became this enormous thing. And it's interesting because the impact of social dynamics on boys and the impact of social dynamics in boys' emotional lives on us, right? On the community, on school, on boys' engagement in school, and what they think they can do when they get older, their ability to become contributing members of our communities, is just as important as what I was talking about in Queen Bees. And so I'm glad that you're talking about masterminds, because I think in some ways that book is equally, if not more important than Queen Bees is. And so what I would say about boys is people say, "Oh, girls are so hard. They're so easy when they're young, but they're so hard when they get so difficult when they get older. And boys are so hard when they're younger and they get so easy when they get older." And I think that's disrespectful in some ways, or not seeing young people as the people that they are when we make those kinds of comments. Because both boys and girls, have a right to an emotional life. They just do. And friendships are incredibly important, and joining groups and bringing young people and bringing somebody in from the outside into a group is really important for both boys and girls. And so my bottom line is, it might look different. Boys might look different in the way that they hang out with their friends, right? I mean, I had 2 boys, and I'm one of those people that had like 8 boys over at the house all the time. So yes, they are loud. Yes, they are funny. Yes, they leave their shoes so do girls, like all over the front of your house. But they need emotional connection, and their friendships are absolutely profoundly important to them. And when their friendships become more distant, they are really distraught by it. It just looks different. And so the whole thing of like, well, boys play with toys and trucks and girls play with dolls, both kinds of people need friends, and they both need to know that they're important and they have a sense of belonging in the world, and that they can speak out when things are hurting them, and that they both need resilience when they have these conflicts, that they can come back from those experiences. So I think for boys, they just wanted people to know that. And in masterminds, people would consistently say to me, "I can't believe you could get the boys to talk to you." You can get boys to talk to you if you stop lecturing them and stop making assumptions about them, and you say, "Hey, this is the way I see the world. Can you tell me what you think about that? Can you tell me where I'm wrong?" They will talk to you for hours. Hours.
It's great. Would love to ask you, what did your research reveal about the impact of technology with boys?
So boys are much more, they lurk on social media much more than girls do. So
Great word.
Right? So because they're scared. Yeah. They really are scared of like saying the wrong thing. So because the other thing is, people think boys are so simple. They're not simple. The whole rules of humor and what's funny and what's not funny, and who gets to make jokes and who doesn't, and how they're responded to, and how they just greet each other is incredibly complicated. And I mean, just humor, incredibly complicated. And I know people might listen to this and think, "Come on," because they do like gross jokes or dirty jokes or whatever. It's complicated. Boys' humor is complicated. And the thing that's complicated is that, where's the line where something is not funny? In boy world, actually the line keeps moving. And because you can't say to boys within their groups or in their social dynamics, really have so much pressure on them to think that to say or react as if everything's funny. Nothing is serious. And then we have this viewpoint about boys that they don't take things seriously, or that they don't care about things. And it's really unfortunate, because at a certain point, I think the boys start believing their own message, which is, no, nothing is serious. And then they can get themselves into really really troubling situations or look like they are participating in really harmful incidents, hurtful, harmful things to themselves and other people, and they don't quite know how they got there. And the way that they consistently will talk about it, and so will adults who don't really want to deal with boys' emotional lives, will say it just got out of hand. It didn't get out of hand. It was actually predictable from the very beginning. If we don't say to boys, actually, there are things that you have the right to say, that's not funny. And the way that I do it, the way I say it, is if you are entertained by somebody else's humiliation, you get to say that's not funny.
Mm-hmm.
You actually get to say that. Like,
right.
You actually get to feel that. You actually get to believe that. And that's the rule in my family, of like somebody else's entertainment is not somebody else's humiliation or embarrassment. Now, my sons if they were right here, right now, like right next to me right now, they would be like, oh, Mom, come on, right? They don't necessarily have to agree to me to my face, but they need to know what I stand for, right? Which is, this is what I stand for. And so like, I just also want to be clear that boys can also, including my own, can say like, oh, Mom, right? They know what I stand for, which means they know when they were younger, especially, that I would discipline them based on those kinds of values.
So great.
Well, you've already said so many helpful things for parents of boys. Is there anything else you would add in this day and time that you really want parents of boys to hear?
Yeah. I mean, I guess for boys, like, I will speak as a parent in this situation as, I have two boys. They're 2 years apart and they're in their 20s now. They're 23 and 21. And my older one, was very, was always getting into power battles with people. He was very tall, looked much older than he was from the time he was little. So just, I'm sure like you've talked about, like, when you've got kids like that, people treat boys very differently if they look older, and for better and for worse. And, but he was always he struggled a lot with like power dynamics, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. He never looked like he did. He was an athlete in all different kinds of ways. And my husband and I were very, very focused on helping him, getting him the support he needed and staying in school and all of the things that like you need to do to focus on a child who's really struggling with their mental health. The thing that I would say, especially for parents of boys, is that in a family dynamic, if you've got one kid like that, then you've got another kid. And in my case, my younger child was always very smooth, right? Very easy. And he was always like, it's fine, don't worry about it. And boys have that really easily of like, don't worry about it, I'm fine. And so it exacerbates with boys about like, it's fine, don't worry about it. But my younger son was going through his own things and his own problems, his own tragedies, his own sadnesses, his own ups and downs. And he was so worried, though, about not putting more onto my husband and I because of our older child, that he would dismiss the things that he was going through, because he didn't want to add to our worry. And I think it's really important, especially for boys. And I know we have so many families are dealing with mental health issues within their own families, like with one child. But I don't want us to forget about the other children. And so just going and saying, now I'm saying this, but I don't want you to go, if you're listening to this, I don't want you to go to the easy kid and like sit them down and be super intense about like, are you okay? So don't listen to this and then go have some like intense conversation with your kid, because that's scary, because we are scary. Parents are scary. I really want you to like very easily, like no big deal, just say like, for 3 seconds, like, hey, I just want you to know, I know we're going through a hard time with your younger sister, your older brother, whatever. But you have a right to have your own emotional life too. And if there's anything going on with you, that I want to be here for you just as much as I'm there for the other people in the family, the other child in the family. And then you can walk away. You don't have to wait for them to start talking to you about some intense thing. Just be able to say it, because you want them to you want them really feeling that they see you, and then walk away.
David, every year when I put up my Christmas decorations, I decide to do a purge and get rid of some things in my garage, attic, or closets.
As Enneagram 1s, we love a good purge, don't we?
Oh, yes, we do. This year, I tackled the kitchen and I swapped out all my toxic kitchenware and appliances for Our Place's non-toxic, healthy, sustainable choices. Our Place is healthy and PFAS-free versus the industry.
I may possibly use the Always Pan 2.0 more than I use the refrigerator in my house. I love that thing.
Our Place is a mission-driven and female-founded brand that makes stunning kitchen products that are healthy and sustainable. They're beautifully designed in amazing colors that feel like art objects that elevate any home and make you feel creative in the kitchen.
Their colors really are amazing. My set is in sage and we leave them out all the time.
So do I. Our Place has 75,000 five-star reviews on their award-winning products, and they've been mentioned in the New York Times, Bon Appetit, and more.
That's why Our Place is in everyone's kitchen, from Selena Gomez to David Beckham and David Thomas.
Upgrade to Our Place today and say goodbye to forever chemicals in your kitchen. Go to FromOurPlace.com and enter our code RBG at checkout to receive 10% off site-wide. That's FromOurPlace.com, code RBG.
Our Place offers a 100-day trial with free shipping and returns. As we continue to think about kids' social development, we love to ask you, is there anything your work revealed that parents could do or not do to help promote healthy relationships for kids?
That parents can do?
Yes.
Well, I mean, moms, I would say if you have a dad in your life, that sometimes if you think they're doing it wrong, but maybe they're just doing it different, that's okay. I think sometimes for me, I'm speaking as a mom, that as long as the dignity of a child is intact, and this, I want to be really clear about this, that for me, the whole thing of, you have to respect your parents no matter what. I work all over the world in all different kinds of cultures. And we all across the board for pretty much have this thing of you have to respect your elders. But we also have to be more mindful, I think, about what that means. Because I do think respect is really important. But I also think the way we use the word respect is actually really dishonest. Because in our schools and in our families, it is not uncommon for us to have experiences where, as a young person, we have to show respect to somebody that we actually don't respect. And the reason we don't respect them is because in some way they are taking away the dignity, the essential worth of someone else. And I know that is countercultural, believe me. And I really do work all over the world talking about this concept. But we often are in situations where we have to show respect to people who actually don't merit it. And I think that you don't have to respect the actions of someone who is humiliating other people, mocking other people, taking away the dignity of other people, abusing the power of other people. I don't think that you do. I do think that you need to treat that person with dignity, no matter what, essential worth. And that doesn't go up and down. You just get that. But I think that respect can be earned and lost. And it's an interesting thing. Respect comes from the word in Latin of to look through and to look again. And respect is tied to, the meaning of it is tied to seeing someone and seeing what they are doing. So it's a complicated issue. And so for me as a parent, when we're talking about how do we really strengthen relationships with our children respect us when we acknowledge and hold on to and reinforce the importance of dignity to all people in our lives. Mm. So, for example, you can say about a grandparent who might be mean to their grandchild, I'm not going to tell you to respect the actions of that grandparent if they are mean. I'm not going to do that. But you do need to treat them with dignity. So let's talk about what that looks like. So that way we can be respectful of the traditions and culture that we come from, right? Because that's important. And at the same time, be able to live within our values when sometimes those things can actually go against each other, right? It's complicated. Mm-hmm. But for me, one of the most important things I can tell you of 25 years of working in this field is that young people know this. They know this, but they don't put words to it. They have a hard time putting words to it. It's hard to put words to. And so when we talk about the difference between dignity and respect, young people very much feel that we are having much more honest conversations about the complexity of the relationships in their lives. And when we can be honest about that, they are much more likely to come and talk to us when they need to.
Yes. Well, okay, let's talk about your newest work, the 10 to 25 book.
Yeah.
And I love the subtitle, The Science of Motivating Young People, which seems to be something we're hearing parents ask for help with more than ever before. So you developed the practical approach behind this book.
I did.
And we would love to hear what are one or two ideas that you believe can really help motivate young people today.
Yeah. So this book, 10 to 25, was written by my friend and colleague, David Yeager, who worked with Carol Dweck on growth mindset when he was a graduate student at Stanford. And then he then went to University of Texas. He's from Texas. And I've loved his work for a long, long time. So I was, jumped at the chance to help him work on this book. So there's so many good things about 10 to 25. But the two highlights for me in answer to your question is that in general, God bless us as parents and as teachers and as in education, but we consistently tend to say things that we think should motivate young people, but actually don't. So I want us to really, as parents, I want you to think about the things that you say to children. I do this with teachers too. What do we say to children to motivate them? So think about all the things that you say, this is good for your future. This is about healthy choices, be those kinds of things. And then I want you to ask yourself, do they work? Right? Is the things that we're saying working? Because how many times as an adult said, how many times do I have to tell you the same thing? Right? And we don't, or why are we having this conversation? We've already had this conversation countless times, but we don't say it as a question. We actually just say it as an accusation to the child, there's something wrong with them. I want us to actually turn it around and say, why am I saying the same thing over and over again when it doesn't work? Why am I doing this? So, and really take a step back. And in all seriousness, so the question, that David and I were really thinking about for this book was, well, what does motivate young people? And so that means, I define listening as being prepared to be changed by what you hear. And
will you say that again? I love that so much.
Yeah, that I define listening not for understanding, but because that's different. But listening is being prepared to be changed by what you hear. It does not mean you have to agree. Right? We don't have to agree with our children, but it means that we walk into a situation, we are ready to the possibility that we might be changed by what we hear. And our kids can hear it, they can feel it and see it in our body language when we're in conversation with them, right? About that, because they're so finely attuned with us, especially with parents, about the judgments and assumptions that we're making about them. But the other part is that we talk about in 10 to 25 is that when young people start puberty, which is on average, right? You've had people on about this, that we're getting earlier and earlier as we start puberty, that when you start and let's be generous and say at 9, right? On average, right? 9 and 10 is when young people are starting puberty. That you become much more focused on social hierarchy, on where you are in the group, and also, do the adults have power over you? You become much, much more focused on that because the hormones in your body are actually trying to have you figure out how to be in a group, and you're trying to figure out who has power than you do. And so you're constantly getting into these power conversations with yourself about the adults in your life. So you are dealing with somebody as a parent who is constantly having a conversation with themselves about how much power you have. And they really want you to take their lives, their issues seriously. Most important. I don't care how superficial you think it is. It's what they're going through, what they're worried about is serious. It's not catastrophizing oh my God, the world's falling apart, but it is taking it seriously. So the second sort of nugget, there's so many good things that David wrote in this book, and I was really so proud to be able to contribute to it, is that he talks about there's this enforcer mentality, enforcer mindset, which is really about like the kids have to deal with it. They're too soft today. They need grit and resilience. So they just need to deal. So it's the enforcer mentality has high standards, but low support. And on the other side is the protector mindset, which is low standards, but high support. And in COVID, we were all about low standards and high support, which did not help kids at all. So what happens in a family, and I want us to think about this, is that usually if you're in a parenting dyad, it can be quite common for one person to take one role and one person to take the other role.
Yes.
Right. And not only that, but you can be different with different children because our baggage about how we were raised and our family dynamics goes right into this. And it's a part of what I call the invisible operating system, the things that we learned as young people that we bring to our own parenting, and we're not really sure why. So what we're doing with this mindset is to be able to understand the consequences of the enforcer mindset and the consequences of the protector mindset. And we want to have a mentor mindset of high standards and high support. And what does that look like? And so we are in relationship with our young people to be able to understand with them what is high support and high expectations. What does that look like? And so we can, if we can shed, like acknowledge, don't beat ourselves up, but just have some self-compassion about, yeah, my kid just rolls all over me because I can't handle conflict because that was really hard for me when I was growing up. So I just let my kid just argue me to death. And then I laugh about how they're going to go to law school. And then I don't really actually confront myself about how I need to do better holding my boundaries with my child.
I met with that parent yesterday.
Well, right. Okay. I love how they always say, like, my kid's going to go to law school one day. I'm like,
right? Okay, seriously.
Who cares? I mean, like, okay. like it's not. And frankly, we need less arguing in the world and we need a lot more actually talking to each other, right? You don't have to agree, but you do need to actually be able to talk to each other instead of just dominate the conversation and walk away thinking you've won. So that is not the way our communities, we can see the consequence of that in our communities across the country. So the protector mindset, like acknowledge it, grow a backbone, do some work. Enforcer mindset, same thing, like forgive yourself, acknowledge it, give yourself some compassion and realize that the way you're being, like the protector mindset, your kids don't respect you because they walk all over you. The enforcer mindset, yeah, sure. Your kids are going to fear you. They're going to respect you the way I was talking about an enforcement of power, but they're not going to actually respect you, right? Where they admire you and how you hold yourself in the world. So what do you want? I mean, it's the question for parents of like, what do you want? And you've got to make up your mind and do the work.
So good. We have no desire for this rich conversation to come to a close.
Can we just spend the rest of the day with you?
Thank you.
We are committed to respecting your time. And so we're going to end the conversation the way we love to do and move from the substantive to something silly. We're going to go from parenting to something food related. And we've got a two-part question. Part one is queso or guac, and part two is what's your favorite taco?
So guacamole, easy. Because I love queso, but I never feel good after, because you can't have like a little tiny bit of queso. You got to have like a lot, and then I always feel sick after.
Yes.
So, and then I always drink it with like tequila, and that's just not a good combo. It's a great combo. Let's be clear, it's a great combo. It's a great combo, but it's not a good combo. Because you know what? It's like they feed off of each other, and then they say like, yeah, have more. It's not.
Yes.
So guacamole is great. And then what was it? What was my favorite taco?
Yes, favorite taco.
Okay, so I live in Boulder, Colorado, when I'm not traveling for work, and Boulder has all these fancy pants taco places. So I'm just going to go, frankly, with actually what I really like, which is just regular, like ground beef, like just regular classic, not like braised duck with cilantro and I don't know what, which is what is everywhere in Boulder. So I like grilled fish tacos and classic tacos.
Yes.
Yes and yes.
Oh, thank you so much. I cannot wait for people to listen to this episode. It's just really, really helpful. I feel like every minute was so full of good.
Thank you for all the work that you all are doing. Thank you so much.
You're so kind.
It's delightful to meet you. David, what a team we have that we get to call friends who help make this podcast possible.
Amanda Young, our operations manager.
Chris Starrett, our engineer.
Our management team at H Squared.
And we are thrilled to be a part of the That Sounds Fun network.
Our music was created by the insanely talented Dave Haywood of Lady A.
And if this podcast felt helpful to you, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, all the things.
We are grateful for you and cheering you on always.